Reddit. What is your most disturbing, scary, or creepy real story? Story 1. A few years ago, I was walking through the woods off the beaten track a bit, and I smelt this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy, I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great, all swollen and green and black with various runny bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police, who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive, and it got dark, and I was just sitting there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had offed himself. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him, and he would talk to me and not nice things. Mainly about how he was angry I had disturbed his resting place and he wanted me to off myself. Probably just my imagination, but all pretty disturbing at the time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time, and no doubt will be tonight after typing this. Story 2. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side. The real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes, and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road, onto the grass, behind some bushes, to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. The roads weren't empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22 and then fell asleep. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock. 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time, it really freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car, but why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rearview mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now at that time, I thought it was the damn hook killer. You know, the one that scratched the couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate? F that, I thought to myself. So I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was an effing car, parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there, and there wasn't. Then I looked in my rearview mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, "Hey! Hey you! Get the F out of your car! Now!" I noped the F out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Moral of the story? Don't effing sleep on the side of a deserted road. Story 3. A few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead, but it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, maybe in his 40s, a little scruffy, but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to freak him out, so when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you!" And he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down my street, and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was an effing C-word, and he was going to off me and all that. I live right off the corner, and I didn't want him to figure that out, so I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my effing front stoop, staring out at the street like that MFer knew I lived there. He saw me right by again, but he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to my friends, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. Story 4. This one isn't very interesting, but I woke up with blood gushing down my cheek when I was younger, and I didn't feel anything, but my face felt wet. So I went down to my parents' room and they freaked out. Till this day, we still have not a clue what cut my face, but I needed 8 stitches next to my eye. We checked the sheets, pillowcases, edges of the bed, etc., and still no idea. Story 5. So I was sleeping, and in the middle of the dream, a character of my dream who was doing something turned her head, looked at me very seriously, and said, "There's someone in your apartment. Wake up." I nearly had a goddamned heart attack, and my apartment was empty. Story 6. I had awesome parents who let me sleep in the living room on weekend nights when I was very young because my sister was a light sleeper and I could stay up until dawn. But of course, I always end up sleeping on the couch because Nick at night made me tired. So, one night, I wake up to that prickly feeling, like an instinct. Just bolted into a sitting position and stared out the front window. We lived in rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of trees. In perfect light cast from the moon, I see a silhouette of someone in this effing tree. The family dog dashes to the window and is snarling into the glass. Terrified, I run to my parents' room and try to explain to my parents that there's a strange person outside. Dad grabs something defensive and darts outside with the dogs to beat the wax off the hothead. I tremble in Mama's arms until Dad comes home and says he saw no one and to go to bed. I decide to sleep in my regular bedroom. I fill in my sister as to what happened. Dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We're all still and I finally think, I can sleep. Nope. I noticed the man outside my window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he gives me a shush signal and runs away. Just turns around to run a straight line away. I swear, I couldn't stop crying for what felt like hours. Story 7. I was 17 and had just gotten my license. Back in high school, my friends and I had made it a mission to find abandoned houses to throw parties in. We had a few good candidates, but the motherlode was this house I would pass on my home from work. It was an underdeveloped shell of a huge home with a large property in the back. I had told one of my friends about it, and one day, before we went to see a movie, I took him to the house. It was about dusk in summer, so I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house, and we were there for like 10 seconds, tops, before we pulled back to go on the main road. A minute later, this big truck pulls up behind us with its high beams on and is riding our ass. My friend and I took note of it, but paid it no mind as we headed back to the main road. At the light, I turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station at the corner and blocked us off. One of the truck comes this big hulk of a man, and my friend and I are crapping our pants. He raps on the window and I roll it down. Now, the really freaky part is that this is a busy road, and now there was no one in sight. He asks us what we were doing at the house, and I quickly lied and said we were making a U-turn. He stares at us for a few seconds, smiles, and sends us on our way. To this day, the house remains unfinished, and I'm convinced it's a drug operation of some sort. Don't go into abandoned houses, man. Story 8. Woke up, clock says 3:34 a.m. I'm 17 and in my bedroom. It's pitch black, but I hear some rattling downstairs. Terrified, I quickly tiptoe to my parents' room. Weird, it's empty. Where are my parents at 3:34 in the morning? I go upstairs to my brother's room, because he's usually awake all night, but while the light is on, no one is in the room. So I guess whatever those noises are downstairs, it must be them. But why are they awake? Maybe someone died? I go downstairs. In the middle of my living room is what looks like 2 men stealing our TV. No one else is in sight. I run upstairs as quietly as possible, shut and lock my door. Suddenly, there's banging on the door. I wake up. It was a dream and the relief washes over me. I look over at the clock. Weird coincidence. It's 3:34 a.m. I'm shaking, but decide to go downstairs to prove myself that everything's fine. I go downstairs. The 2 men are in my kitchen, screaming at my parents and brother. I run upstairs to my bedroom and lock the door. 10 seconds later, I hear banging. I wake up again. It's 3:34 a.m. This time, I had actually woken up, and I don't manage to fall back asleep for about 36 hours.